Hello everyone, it's Theme Park Avenue, I'm Eric, and as you saw in the title, this is my ranking of the top 25 roller coasters I've ever ridden. This is out of around 300 roller coasters, so pretty stiff competition. And before we get into it, just remember it's based on my personal experiences, and I'll explain why I like each roller coaster in the rankings. And also, before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you know when new theme park content comes out. It's free to subscribe, and in return, you will know when the new stuff comes out right away. Let's get into the list. Number 25 is Raging Bull at Six Flags Great America. Honestly, an excellent B&M hyper, and while it doesn't have as much airtime as others per se, I think the speed and just the way the layout goes around this sort of experience you get, it's something else. It's hard to describe, but it feels like an adventure more than most roller coasters, even if you're not getting the craziest forces and elements. It's not as spread out as some others, and I like that it's not an out and back generic. The twister layout actually works really well with B&M hypers, and I like to see it on more of them. Also, of course, the first drop is amazing. Number 24 is Phoenix at Knoebels. Some of the craziest airtime I've ever experienced for sure. I think as far as wooden coasters go, easily one of the best. There are some I prefer, and I thought Phoenix might go a bit higher on my list, but I don't really think it's quite as amazing, well-rounded as a few other rides. But best ride at Knoebels for me, and I very much enjoy it. And if you don't like the airtime of Phoenix, check out Twister at Knoebels because it offers a very different experience. But Phoenix overall earned a top 25 spot, but I wouldn't say is a number 1 Golden Ticket Award wooden coaster sort of thing. Number 23 is Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City. This one is held back just a bit by some pretty painful moments that kind of are interspersed throughout the ride. It's rough, and I understand wooden coasters are rough. That's something I have to live with. And there are plenty that I think are rattly but don't hurt. This one does hurt, so it does kind of lower the ranking, because this thing's pacing is relentless. I could easily see it being top 10, honestly, if it were not something that caused me pain. I love the inversions, the airtime moments it has are great, and its sense of speed is just immaculate, and it's honestly one of the best crafted RMCs in many ways. Number 22 is Goliath. Which Goliath? Six Flags Over Georgia. Easily the best of Goliaths, though there are other good ones of course. This one is an excellent B&M hyper. You have the first drop being very strong, the floater airtime hills, fantastic as usual for B&M. The helix gives plenty of intensity. This ride feels faster than most hypers. And the ejector hills at the end. That's something you don't get a whole lot of on B&M hypers. So it's a well-crafted layout. There's something I love about the setting of this ride, the way it kind of goes outside of the park. So it's just a very enjoyable experience, and of course, a very well-rounded one. Number 21 is El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. Yeah, sorry everyone. There is a lot to enjoy about this ride. The first drop really is as good as people say. The hills afterwards, 2 or 3 of them, amazing. And there's a lot of spectacular moments, though I must admit, after the main great airtime hills, I don't think the ride's as memorable, and that does kind of bring it down, because I think if a ride is one where you just remember the first parts of it, it's not going to be the best thing ever. And I should also point out, everyone who says El Toro is smooth and that I'm hard on it for being rough, I really want to know what kind of ride you got on El Toro. El Toro is definitely not a painless ride. I got some serious jackhammering in the back row, and front row rides, they're not as strong in terms of the airtime or first drop. I wish I could mix the two, the great forces of the back and the smoother experience of the front. I think El Toro is an awesome ride, but it's not really the best wooden coaster in the world for me like it is for many others. Number 20 is Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. Another excellent B&M hyper, similar great setting, also even better floater airtime than Goliath, and the one thing that really gives it an edge for me is the final parts. Everyone kind of clowns on the second half, and I don't understand that. I think it's the best part of the ride. It has a great sense of speed, you still get some airtime, and you go over the water, and it's very fun. Not too much else to say about that. Many have talked about Mako before, and for a long time it was the best roller coaster in Florida. I'll get to a few others in Florida later though. Number 19 is Orion at Kings Island. I realize there are plenty who don't really enjoy this ride as much. Some would call it number 1 at Kings Island though. I'm kinda in the middle. I think Orion has a lot going for it. The first drop feels like it goes forever, and that's a good thing. The speed hill is fantastic. Plenty of the moments, honestly, are fun. I think it's a great ride in terms of speed. It holds the speed pretty well. Not as well as some other Gigas, but still, it does a great job with that. And the one thing that stands out for me that holds it back just a little bit is that most of the rides above it are longer and have a bit more to them. But Orion is still excellent roller coaster. Number 18 is Diamondback at Kings Island. I give this the slightest edge. It was super close between these two. And yes, Diamondback can rattle in the back row, but nowhere else. And I think I ultimately gave Diamondback the edge because I had a trimless ride on it, and it was insane. The speed going through the second half was something else. The Helix is fun, and honestly the water splash adds quite a bit to this one, makes it a much more enjoyable ride. And even though it's smaller than Orion, the airtime honestly overall is better for me. And I love the way the ride kind of goes back toward the forest. There's nothing I would really change about Diamondback. It is my favorite B&M Hyper, and it's definitely a fantastic ride. Number 17 is Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland. This is another Giga to go on the list, and this one's floater airtime is just some of my favorite I've ever experienced. I do get that it's not the most well-rounded of layouts compared to other Gigas, but compared to pretty much everything else on this list, it is very well-rounded. The ride has the excellent airtime. It feels longer than Orion for some reason. I don't think it actually is, but it does. And there's so much to enjoy on it. Even though the only thing I'm really talking about is the airtime and speed, those are the highlights of pretty much any Giga, and this one does a great job with it. Number 16 is Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. This one I can see many putting much higher, but for me, it's not the best RMC. It is smaller, but it doesn't feel that much smaller, because the first half is excellent. You have phenomenal ejector moments and inversions, and the speed for the first 2/3 really hauls. The issue is the final third, where you really feel it slow down, and there are points where you may think it's not going to make it to the station. The only other minor nitpick is that the first drop is among the weakest of RMCs, but still very good. This is still an elite roller coaster. There are just some RMCs I enjoy more, even though this one probably is better than some of those. For example, number 15 is New Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas. I know that's crazy, right? First RMC, no one really loves that one, above Wicked Cyclone. Well, this ride is mad underrated. The first drop is significantly better than Wicked Cyclone for me, and the airtime moments are all awesome. And while yes, this one loses speed for a greater portion of the ride, it doesn't lose as much speed. And it has kind of that Raging Bull feel to it a lot, where I feel it's just kind of having an adventure, and it's going throughout the layout, kind of winding through the structure, and of course the tunnels at the end add a huge fun factor to the ride. The ride's pacing is very strong even with the lack of speed, and I kind of like overbanks a lot, so it worked for me. I don't really miss the inversions because there are very few cases where inversions are the best part of an RMC. There are some, but still not that many. And I feel it's a blast of a ride, bested over Texas, and underrated overall. Number 14 is the Joker at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. Another underrated RMC. Many say it's the worst of the hybrids. I think it's actually one of the better ones probably. It's a phenomenal ride. Pretty much everything about it, from the first drop, which is admittedly one of the weaker ones for me, but still great, to the excellent airtime moments, to some of the best inversions on any RMC, great pacing, and an incredible length. The ride does have lesser stats than some of the best RMCs, but it doesn't feel like that too much. So I thoroughly enjoy Joker, and definitely would call it one of the best roller coasters out there, even if very few would. Number 13 is Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. Now gone, but I really did want to mention it. I wrote it in 2021, so it was recently enough, and I can't imagine making a list where Top Thrill Dragster wasn't on it. It's a great ride. The launch is certainly the highlight. It builds up an insane amount of speed, and I love that. While obviously there isn't too much to it, there's the great launch and the view and the drop, but there isn't a huge layout the way there is for others. And I was talking about well-rounded rides earlier, but this one, the highlight, the launch, is so good that it earns the ride a pretty good spot overall. Number 13, it earned it. And the launch was one of the greatest moments on any roller coaster, and I hope Top Thrill Dragster is still excellent when it reopens as a new ride. We'll see. Number 12 is Kingda Ka at Six Flags Great Adventure. I've talked before about why I think this is better than Top Thrill Dragster and El Toro for that matter, but I think this ride gets too much flack. I hear people say it's rough and the restraints are bad, but I found it smooth and thought the restraints did not take away from the ride at all. Technically, Dragster has better restraints, but the only thing besides that Dragster really does better is the fact that the launch feels more sudden. Kingda Ka is a bit more gradual, but it feels like it builds up way more power. Kingda Ka feels far more intense, and I call it probably the biggest rush and most intense of any roller coaster I've been on. It is a phenomenal ride, top ride at Great Adventure, and just one of the greatest roller coasters out there. Number 11 is Maverick at Cedar Point. One of the most well-rounded launch coasters. It's a phenomenal ride for sure. You have a magnificent first drop, strong airtime moments, crazy inversions, stangle dives, the tunnel launch as one of my favorite roller coaster moments period, a nice theme to go with it because the ride does seem to wind through the canyons and over water, and the aesthetics actually add quite a bit to the tight turns and intense layout. Sometimes intensity can be a bit much on this one, and the restraints really can hurt. But besides restraints, this is one of the best launch coasters out there by far. And it's kind of sad it got knocked out of the top 10 this year. By number 10, Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. I cannot understand how anyone who rode this year could get a bad ride on it. It was insane for me. I first rode it this year, only a few months ago actually, and it was wonderful. Everything about it screamed RMC, but by a GCI. It had top tier pacing, tons of airtime moments. Even the first drop was awesome. And of course, going through that setting, excellent. The forest adds quite a bit to this one. It feels like a long ride, and it does not let up. But it also does not have these shin guards that make most RMCs uncomfortable, so that's an added bonus. I consider putting this one a bit higher too, and it was close. But it has to sit at number 10 for now. That said, it's the best ride at Kings Island, and one of the best wooden coasters I've been on. Number 9 is GhostRider at Knott's Berry Farm. The best wooden coaster I've been on. I love everything about it. This one's airtime probably beats that of Mystic Timbers, and it might be more intense as well. This one is a bit more of a classic wooden coaster, obviously it's much older, and I think has a bit of a charm to it that makes that a bit better. I'm not taking into account the operations for this list, otherwise, yeah, this might not be that high. But I love the ride. The whole experience is one of the best I've ever had, and I'm really excited to possibly go back one day. Number 8 is Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. This is nearly a perfect roller coaster. Pretty close. The issue is the restraints, which everyone's complained about before, but I feel like no one's complaining about the right part. Everyone says their thighs get crushed the way they would on Sky Rush, but no. It's the really painful and sharp metal sides of the restraints at your legs that hurt a lot more. During the ride, it's not that bothersome until like the very end, but the ride itself earns a great spot. First drop, excellent. Immaculate airtime. Even some of the airtime hills much later in the ride provide some of the best ejector ever. The ride feels like an adventure, and it's one of the few Six Flags roller coasters where DC theming actually seems to service the ride, because it really does feel like you're flying as Superman. It's a long ride, first half with airtime, second half with more intense forces, and there really is nothing I would change about the layout. I guess technically the sense of speed is not as strong as some other Intamins that will be on this list, but other than that, excellent roller coaster, and one of the best rides out there. Number 7 is Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. Apart from having the best restraints of an RMC, those older trains are much better for me. This ride is a blast. The first drop is of course top tier, and following that, you interact with the quarry wall. Such a unique setting for a ride. And the dives off of it, especially that final one, are amazing. And then you have the underrated section on the wall. People say it's really slow and poorly paced, but I did not have that issue. And the inversions, especially the one that comes close to the wall, that's awesome. I think the biggest flaw with the ride is that it's far from the longest RMC in terms of how it feels, but it definitely packs a lot into what it has, and it's one of the best roller coasters, one of the best RMCs, earned a great spot for sure. Number 6 is Twisted Colossus. I'm going to specifically cite the Coaster Studios review from recently in his vlog at Magic Mountain, where he said it has a near perfect layout when dueling, but when not dueling, it's a bottom tier RMC. That I cannot get behind. I like racing on rides for sure, it's fun, but it doesn't really add that much to the experience. And I have done dueling and non-dueling with Twisted Colossus. Dueling is a bit better, but on a high thrill ride like that, come on. It's a great ride either way. The first drop, though far from the tallest of RMCs, certainly feels like it might be the tallest. It's excellent. The Top Gun stall and other inversions, all wonderful. The high five, spectacular. There is not a single dead moment on this ride except for the second lift hill. I admit it's a bit weird, but it's such a fascinating idea, and even when you only get one train going and it's not dueling, I really enjoy the fact that you get two rides essentially on slightly different layouts with unique elements, and it's like a two for the price of one sort of thing, and that's why it is the best roller coaster at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and you won't be seeing X2 on the list. Number 5, Jurassic World Velocicoaster at Universal's Islands of Adventure. Who doesn't love this one? People really jumped on the hype train with this one, and that got me thinking, alright, I gotta get on this. And I did. And I've mentioned before, it is a fantastic ride the whole way through. The first half admittedly does not have as strong pacing as the second, but what it does have is great hang time and airtime. And, of course, top-tier theming. The Raptor turns are particularly fun, as the statues look quite realistic. They are statues, of course, but it still works. Then you have the top hat after that second launch, get a moment to catch your breath, and then you go through some of the craziest inversions Intamin's ever made, at really high speeds. The Mosasaurus roll is just an unbelievable element. You get close to the water, you fly through, but it still feels like it takes forever. Velocicoaster definitely earned that top 5 spot. Number 4 is Millennium Force at Cedar Point. I've talked about this one enough on the channel, so I'm not really going to explain too much why it's in the top 25. Just check out pretty much any other video if you want to see that. But it boils down to best first drop, great intensity, great speed, great airtime, fun experience. Number 3 is Fury 325 at Carowinds. This slightly edges out Millennium Force as the best Giga, as even though I don't think it holds speed quite as well as Millennium Force, it brings a bit more to the table. You have phenomenal floater and ejector airtime, and tons of unique elements that give forces I didn't even know existed. Treble Clef is a blast, and every other element packed in works wonders for the overall ride. It's a phenomenal experience, not to mention the ride's one of the most beautiful roller coasters out there to look at. There really is nothing to change and improve about it. Fury is the best Giga Coaster, the best B&M, and the best of so many things. Number 2 is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. Of course, this was number 1 for a long time for me. And by a long time, I mean like 2, maybe 3 years. But still, Steel Vengeance is definitely one of the best roller coasters out there, and anyone who thinks it's number 1 is probably right. The airtime is the best of any roller coaster overall. First drop is a great start. Actually, the pre-section is a great start. That even gives you some airtime. The Outer Bank's one of the best airtime moments out there, probably the best. The inversions are good for sure, and that finale is brutal, in the best possible way. Not to mention it's a very long ride, and gives quite a bit of bang for the buck. Steel Vengeance, it's a huge adrenaline rush. And it's not like Top Thrill Dreister where it's one great moment then over. It's tons of almost as great moments packed into one ride. And that is why Steel Vengeance definitely got top spot last year. But this year, number 1 is Iron Gwazi. That's right, the wait is over. Iron Gwazi can now be my number 1. Now, I've talked before about the fact that it is not because of hype or the fact that Busch Gardens Stamp is my home park. I definitely went in expecting Iron Gwazi to be a great RMC, but probably not better than Twisted Colossus, or I guess I could say even Joker, but I wrote Iron Gwazi before Joker, so I guess I can't say that for sure. But it seemed like a mid-tier RMC because of the length, and some elements didn't seem to be great in the POV. But once I got on, this is a pretty much unbeatable ride. First drop, Trump Steel Vengeance. The death roll is the best inversion I've experienced. The Outer Bank turn, just as good as that of Steel Vengeance. The stall is admittedly not the best part, but the wave turn is nuts. That's possibly one of the greatest moments on any roller coaster, right up there with the death roll. And obviously there aren't filler elements in between stuff the way there was on Steel Vengeance, but there don't need to be. It allows you to really focus on the best stuff the whole way through, and while it's definitely not the longest RMC, it feels like it might be, because of just how much is put in there. And yes, the restraints are not the best either, so there are things that can be changed, but there is so much elite in this ride that I don't care. It is the best roller coaster I've been on for me, my favorite for sure, and that is going to be the end of this list. Thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below your top 25 if you're willing to do that. Subscribe for more theme park content. I'll see you next time.